Hey, welcome to Campaigns and Coffee. Grab your mug and let's dive into tales of adventure and the answers to your quirkiest of questions. Today, we are talking about how we prep for a game or a campaign. So, as we sip, wrong cue. There we go. So, yeah, perfect. Better that was better than the last episode that we forgot to hit record on. So the question that we have is, it's like, how do you all prep? I've been seeing stuff on YouTube and other locations about people talking about how they prep for their game or a campaign or whatever. And I thought we should talk about that sort of thing because we all prep a little bit differently.
Right now, I'm not running anything original. So when I do something original or homebrewed, it's a different process. But most of my prep, there's kind of three phases. The first one is let's read the thing that we think we're going to be running. And then there is a long period of staring off into space with a notepad in my hand where I process, I think, I make notes. It's kind of, and honestly, that second section is my favorite part. Is the, how do I? It's what's happening there is, okay, how does what I read actually relate to my players, and what kind of things can I figure could possibly come out of this that may not be covered by the flavor text or the, or how can I personalize this more? Or how can I hook this into a character or something like that? Just kind of like setting up the terrain, looking for the opportunities. And then the third phase is, I'd call it the physical game, but we do a lot of software. So it's the, all right, make sure the tabletop's working. Make sure we've got the right maps. Set up the maps. Think through, are we going to be doing combat? We can't do combat on that map. Let's set up a combat map and kind of but that's like the last phase. And usually this all takes place within like a day or two of the game beforehand. But usually that final phase takes place like 2 hours before the game, where I sit down and just kind of like, all right, bring up Roll20. All right, make sure we got the right maps, arrange them right. Just because, and this all, it's like any rules exist because someone did something stupid and now you need a rule. I have done a number of stupid things in not prepping for a game and had things go not terribly, but certainly it could have gone better. And
you don't want a gap
it's
of
been
like 10, 15 minutes trying to find the right map and set it up, etc.
Precisely, or realizing
done it earlier.
I found this with running Rime of the Frost Maiden. They have these encounters that take place out on the tundra, but there are no maps of tundra. So now I made a tundra map and, put some things in it to make it easy to set up. And, it's not a lot of work, but it's interesting. Now I'd like to hear from everybody else. I'm looking forward to figuring out what I do for an original homebrew game. I haven't run one in a while and I'm kind of itching to do it, but that's my process.
Yeah, your step 2 of notebook staring off into space reminds me of when Neil Gaiman was asked how he either gets his ideas for writing or like gets into the mood for writing. And he said he'll walk upstairs and he'll sit down in his chair and with a notepad, because evidently he writes longhand for some of the stuff, and we'll say, he has a window and he'll say, and after a half an hour, I'm the ideas just flow. It's a matter of like being bored, and you have like having the notebook and no other distraction and all the information that you just finished reading in your head. It's like fertilized ground at that point. And so as soon as you're bored, your mind just starts working and to try and fill in the boredom.
And specifically making notes longhand. I work on a Remarkable tablet. But, it could just be a notebook. But the shift between staring at the digital stuff and then going to it works for me. Now, I do have standard hardback books, but a lot of the campaign stuff is digital these days. Anyway. That's what I.
So I've never been in a game that Erin or Josh have run. So I'm curious. I know Erin runs stuff. Josh, do you run stuff?
Yeah, I've run stuff. I ran a couple different Star Wars games, but
I'm in one.
Yeah, she's in one.
Well, there you go. Cool. I mean, so far you've only been a player in the various games I've played in. So I haven't gotten to see the game master side of you. So what do you do to prep?
I figure out first thing, research all kinds of different torture methods.
Dude, that got dark fast.
No, it depends on who I'm playing with, because the first group I ever DM'd for were probably some of the most creative people that I've ever known, and that was a bad thing because they went off on a whole bunch of different tangents that I did not see coming at all. And so the first thing that I ever run, I was like, there's no prep that I could do for these people at all. Outside of, I've got a few enemies kind of ready in various locations, but that's about it. And I was like, and it became more, how am I going to get a person into wherever they want to go to kind of help veer them back onto some kind of path, because they're out in the woods. But overall, most of the prep work that I end up doing for most of the normal games that I've done after that is just research. It's a lot of just kind of like what Chris was saying, is a lot of note taking on the various characters that I've got, and then figuring out how the world is going to change around the people more than trying to change the people. That's one of the big things that I've learned, is how do you just change the world around the people rather than trying to change the people. You're never going to change them.
When you say change the world around the people, do you mean like if they go in an area that you didn't expect, does suddenly the town that they were supposed to go to exist over there? Or are you saying that you understand how the world is working and so it's reacting to what the players are doing?
Exactly that. Yeah, the second one. It's a lot of, okay, well, they did that in the town and now they're going out here, but hey, the farmers outside the town may have heard of everything that just happened about the bar fight that had 4 people murdered.
That might happen.
And now how are the farmers going to react as they're passing through their lands? Are they going to avoid them? Was it somebody that was going to be asking for help is now terrified to even talk to them, and like things like that? So it's a lot of reaction rather than action, I guess.
Erin,
and then every now and then I've got a monkey wrench ready to kind of throw into things. Like,
Erin,
for example,
you run a little differently than I think most of us. You run mostly convention games and pre-written modules at convention games.
But I've also written some of them, and then I have Discord roleplay, which I do. So I have a variety of different types of prepping that I do. It kind of just depends upon what I'm prepping for. If I'm prepping for a convention game, which is a 4-hour block that I write for in a Star Wars campaign, the first thing I want to do is figure out how I'm going to make characters change. And I don't mean their core, but if I'm going to put the effort of writing a 4-hour module, I want the characters to grow in some respect. And so I'm asking myself, what are some quintessential questions that I could get these characters to grow on? Or how create something that they go through where they're like, okay, I took a step and I answered something different about my character that I didn't express that before. And when I figure out that question, usually with a lot of music listening to and an awful lot of pacing, I cannot sit and my mind just wanders in too many different directions. My feet have to be active, so I'll pace. And I'll listen to music, and then the ideas start to fire in my head. But I need to find kind of that question or that step that a character could take by going through whatever journey I'm going to create. And once I figure that, the rest starts to fall into place. But really, I start with trying to search for some quintessential question or some reason why a character would grow. That's where I try to shoot.
I can testify to the pacing side of things. a lot of pacing.
That's a great perspective, honestly. Thinking about that, like I think that happens more often than not. That probably happens accidentally in my campaigns. I do occasionally, like I will take a step back and think through how the last couple of games have gone to think about, do people have roles, like especially in the Cyberpunk game. Like, okay, wait. What is the Nomad going to do? Does the Netrunner have something to do with this particular thing? So I guess I've been, and also like what sort of cool backstory, like what hooks can I go back to try and pull into this particular game? Honestly, mostly I'm inspired primarily by deadlines. I have to have it or else it won't work. I've tried to get better about this, but you know, I'll often have my best ideas the night before, the day of, an hour before the game is ready to go, right? Which is a problem when you're doing it online, because as you were saying, Chris, right? Like in the real world, I could just throw down my battle map and like you sketch out whatever was in your head. Online, I suppose you could do the same thing, but it doesn't feel as good, I guess. Like kind of set this expectation for ourselves, right?
I think you'd need like a tablet with a pen to be able to have the same sort of feel and control.
Yeah.
Like unless you're in a drawing program all the time, you know, trying to draw, especially with like a mouse or a trackpad, is awful.
Yeah, now that I have an iPad Pro, I was hoping maybe I could do that with Roll20. Roll20 just simply does not work on the tablet. I'm holding my iPad up right now. I haven't tried Foundry. Maybe that would be better, but there's not the touch interface, the pen interface just isn't there yet.
Gotcha.
I think, like Erin, the things that get me inspired, I could not go up in a room and just like be bored like that, because my brain would just go and find a bazillion other things to do other than what I'm supposed to be doing. And so I like playlists. So I usually create a playlist for a campaign. So I've got an Elemental Apocalypse campaign playlist that's inspired by like Underworld and Resident Evil and all of these other sort of like really driving metal type music. I've got one for Cyberpunk that rips from Edge Runners and from the Cyberpunk computer game and various things that Chris keeps posting, right? And then I'll run. So like a lot of times when I'm running, that like helps me put my brain into freeform mode, right? And I'll have this idea, I'm like, okay, cool. And then I'll just jot it down and then I'll just keep running again. So a lot of times it's just this scatter shot, various ideas start to congeal, and then stark terror sets in because I have to run it the next day, and then I do all the work.
Yep.
That's wild. I like a longer arc, especially if I'm writing things. The deadline thing, I get the deadline thing. Deadlines aren't as motivating for me. I mean, let's put it this way. Well, they're motivating in that I know that there's a hard stop. But I will usually back it out so that, like, I give myself, like, 2 weeks.
I tell myself I'm going to do that.
I know. And well, this gets into neural chemistry or something, I'm sure. But you know, but also, frankly, Ken, I'm just not as busy as you are. So, you know, the fact that I can, you know, do that and kind of keep it in my head and then, you know, sit. But a lot of it comes down to, for me anyway, stepping away and doing it by hands on something. Like I say, my Remarkable tablet, sometimes paper, but I like having the digital stuff. I find that if I need to, I can do it with typing, but it's a different feel. It's a different experience. I know that sounds crazy, but sitting there and sketching things out and drawing lines and things like that, the sheer doodling of it all by hand helps set it in my brain more than a bullet point list in like a markdown document or something. So, but yeah,
as a former teacher, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say all the above. Like I have notebooks for Cyberpunk and for Elemental Apocalypse, and especially when I'm coming up with maps and like I have an idea. Like a lot of times I'll just have a set piece or a quote or something else that I want to work into the game that just kind of becomes the hook for what I want to drive towards, right? And so quickly sketching, writing down some stuff helps, and then I have all my notes in Obsidian, which is, you know, this note-taking tool with Markdown and does cool connections and stuff. And so a lot of times, sometimes if I'm just completely stuck, I can go look either at my notebook or in Obsidian and see, oh, where was that NPC? Like, oh, random idea. Yeah, I meant to do that. And I'll also, while I'm running the game, especially in my physical notebooks, I'll write down things to follow up on, right? So when I'm getting ready to prep, I'll go back in and look at the list of things like, oh, right, I had this idea in the last campaign or in the last session. I should really bring that forward. I think that's helped quite a lot because I can't remember anything if I don't write it down.
Like I also use Obsidian. I tend to think about things in my head for a long time, and then I'll put them down. A lot of times I'll put things down on paper, but eventually I'll put them into Obsidian, at least recently, because they're much easier to look up, like at the moment at the table in Obsidian, you know, especially if I need to remember a name or something like that. I don't have to flip through 15 pages of notes and go, who was that person again? But if I'm not careful, if I'm starting in Obsidian, I can sometimes get distracted with other things in Obsidian of like, oh, I should make this document look better, or other things like that. So I like having the notebook of just being able to write down. When I used to run long form campaign, which is where I really like doing things, part of the reason is I've got the start over with. Starting a campaign is really, really hard because I don't know the players and their characters yet. Whereas the middle of the campaign and the end of the campaign, I've had weeks of games and games of seeing how they act and react to different things, and I can kind of predict 2 or 3 moves ahead and put things in their way or develop NPCs around those things. And generally, when I was running my fantasy campaign, I already had the world in my head. And so I knew the big movers and shakers and how they would act or react or not even care to the player's actions. And the last big campaign I ran ended up like bopping over multiple different areas of the world on different continents, chasing down the archenemy of one of the characters. And so it was one of those things that I could see where they were going to be going, so I could prep a week or 2 in advance. And then if they didn't get through all that stuff in that night, well, then I have most of the prep done for the next night. So it's the start of a game is still hard. It's like prepping for con game where you have no idea who's going to sit down at your table. And like in Sparks, the Star Wars game that Erin and I play in, you know, each of those people, it's a living campaign, so they have their own individual characters. It's not just a one-shot, here's your character sheet sort of thing. So it's completely blank slate other than, hey, these are characters that might exist in a Star Wars universe. You might get the total bounty hunter, full of guns type of person. You might get a Jedi. Or recently, you might get the rabbit-like Kushiban, where 4 Kushibans sit down at a table and wreak havoc like the killer bunny from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. So, you know, it can be very, very different. And so that's kind of how I feel starting a campaign is. And that's kind of where I'd like to get better at. I'm kind of being forced to get better at because I keep having to restart new campaigns. So maybe I'll be an expert in a year or 2.
That kind of brings up an interesting question. Is it easier or harder to prep for a one-shot versus a long campaign?
I think it's harder for a long campaign because one-shots, there's no expectations that you're going to have some sort of amazing character growth out of it or that you're going to shine spotlights onto individual characters. You're just like, well, let's plan to go and raid this cavern. And I think one-shots basically have a more comedic set to them. And I think campaigns start more comedic and high energy, and because nobody knows their characters. So we're just kind of feeling it out and doing whatever we can do, rolling dice, and I'm going to go punch the barmaid in the face because there's no consequences that I care about in the long term. And then the consequences come because you've been silly and you've done things without thoughts of consequences. And then that's where the GM is like, okay, now I have this enemy, now I have that enemy. At least some of the more successful campaigns that I've seen about the characters make their own enemies and then they become
for sure
personalized. And there was a werewolf campaign that I played where we messed over one guy and we didn't even know his name. We totally screwed him over. And then he started coming back after us. And we didn't even know the guy's name. He was the nameless NPC that we had screwed over but left alive. And he became Charlie. And I think for like 8 months we were duking it out, and all we could call him was Charlie because we didn't even know his name.
Who are you again?
His name wasn't Charlie, but that's what we called him. So, you know.
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
I think when characters make their own enemies in the long term because of some consequences that they didn't want to think about because they were in the high energy phase.
Yeah, I think the high energy phase is something that you can just be in a one shot. And if it is truly a one shot, you know, you're, in my mind, ideally not making characters at the table. The GM has come with characters so that the GM can craft a story around those characters. But you can definitely get more comedic or more high action, high energy, you know, like bits of a movie, you know, like a significant scenes of a movie or a significant arc of a TV show could be played out in a one shot. And because there aren't the consequences, at least like from a GM standpoint of like, what would the fallout be of this one shot? Because now I have an 8-year-long campaign that I need to run based on that one shot. You know, it's like, you don't have to worry about that. You know, it's like, there was one time friend of ours who wanted to use Featherfall where he'd leap off and then kind of glide down at an angle. And the GM was like, no, you can't do that. And he's like, why can't I do that? It's like, and it turned around and was like, because I know you. Because if I let you do this right now, that 3 months down the road, you're going to do this and you're going to expect this to happen again. And it's going to be really, really important then. So that was kind of the back and forth that would happen. But that's kind of the idea is like, you can break all of those expectations in a one shot. And so it's a little easier to deal with on that one.
I will say, when I've prepped my NPCs better, that's when I think my games have gone the smoothest. When I find motivations, and it's kind of like writing a murder mystery. I mean, if you think about it, murder mysteries are a murder happens, we have to lock the doors, and we have to solve the murder, and no one can leave. That's always the setup. And now we start playing with all the different motivations as to why this situation happened. And everybody's got something that makes them look a little bit guilty. But when I work at it from like a murder mystery point, even if it's not a murder mystery, if I come up with conflicting motivations of characters and I leave my players trying to figure out what the motivations between these people are, I often get a lot more energy from the game just when they're trying to like, what is this person up to and why?
Yep.
So those go the smoothest for me.
I would say for one shots, coming up with the PCs is the hardest part for me. It's usually the thing that I drag out the longest. I've tried to change that by front loading the creation of the PCs. I also have been trying to spend more time to make sure that everybody has a hook that connects them to some other character, a la Spirit of the Century, so that people sit down at the table and there's some sort of momentum that's already carrying them forward. They may not remember that from the background, but I think creating the characters, and we had talked about this in some other episode, like when you're learning a game, creating the PCs first can be very helpful because now you understand some of the mechanics, and then that can just drive what you need to set up in the game. That was really what I did with my Mothership one shot. But still, I struggle with it because creating the PCs, I don't know, I can get a mental block about just sitting down and actually coming up with them, right? And once they're in place, though, it's easier. But saving them for the end, like, I've done that so many times where I've written the story was easy, and then I get to the PCs and go, yeah, this is tough.
So I think we're just about out of time right now. We did have a question from one of our future overlords in training, and the question is what is the best way to childproof an evil fortress, especially when your minions keep bringing their kids to work?
You know, I think we got to go to Josh as the lead to this one because I think he's got the most relevant experience right now. I mean, all of our kids are like...
You have the freshest children.
We have success.
You have the freshest children. Ours have been aged.
The pinkest skin.
There is a related thing of how to childproof your house when your kids come back from college, which is a totally different concept. But
Yeah.
Start with toddlers.
My child is the evil overlord.
Okay. Yep.
No, she's an angel.
You're contractually required to say that, right?
Oh man, I feel like I need an overlord voice. I think it's if I'm the evil overlord, it's more. Well, if your kid dies, that's on you. We'll put a little. I don't know. You know those little doorknob covers that you put on the doorknob? We need to put that over the death laser button.
Right, you got all those like safety switches
That's
on
a
all
good
the
idea.
things that can accidentally kill you.
Because the hero isn't going to voluntarily, press the death laser button, but a child certainly will.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
And you don't want that going off too early.
Yeah. No, I mean, let's see. How do you childproof it? I would say cover up everything and power down everything that isn't currently keeping everybody alive.
So I'm going to say if you future overlords in training out there have other ideas on how to childproof an evil fortress, or our main topic of how do you prep for a game, leave us some comments and we'll talk about them in future campaigns and coffee. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.